Hello everyone and welcome to The Good Old Gamer, the channel where we cut through the marketing BS, take a look at new and old gaming technologies to figure out what makes the most sense for you. And in this crazy GPU mining boom market thing, looking at old technologies makes a heck of a lot of sense. So today we're going to be taking a look at the GTX 1050 Ti, as this is a very popular graphics card even today in the market. And since 1050 Ti owners out there, if you happen to be one of them, you can't really upgrade right now. So I was kind of curious to see if that card is still capable enough of running modern AAA games at reasonable settings. So that's what we're going to be taking a look at here today. But first, before we get into it, if you like content like this, please smash that like button. Please comment in the comment section below. Apparently that combination really tells YouTube that you guys really like the content. And even if you don't have much to say, but you want to help support the channel, just type in "for the algorithm" down in the comment section, because hitting the like button and commenting combined just makes YouTube go, "Oh, this must be great stuff." So for all of you guys out there that do that, I really appreciate it. And I want to thank you all for your support. I'd also like to thank Tech for sending me the GTX 1050 Ti for testing. He's another YouTube creator and he sent it to me on a loan, so this way we could do that video. Links to his channel are down in the description below. So you might be asking yourself, why are we taking a look at a 1050 Ti? This was never really a graphics card that I ever recommended here on the channel, but about a month and a half ago, I took a look at the RX 580 to see how well that still held up with 2020's most demanding AAA titles. And it did pretty well. But in the comment section, a lot of you guys asked me to take a look at the 1050 Ti. So I was like, all right, well, is this really a popular card? So I jumped on over to the Steam hardware survey, and surprise, surprise, it's in the number 2 spot. So yes, this is a huge graphics card for a lot of people. And like I mentioned, because you can't upgrade to anything right now, a lot of people are stuck with the 1050 Ti at this particular point in time. Coming in at 6.5% of the market that Steam surveyed, that's a large swath of people. It's more than any AMD card. The RX 580 is AMD's most popular card, according to Steam. So this is the second most popular card out of all of them. So as I said before, typically this was a card, even back in 2016, I didn't recommend, because that GTX 970 or RX 470 level, to me, was always kind of the sweet spot if you wanted 1080p gaming. I never really recommended anything below that, and the 1050 Ti is kind of a unique case where it wasn't a whole lot slower, but it was slower enough that I just didn't see it having legs. So to me, this is personally interesting. I'm really interested to see how it can stand up to 2020's most demanding AAA titles. So I decided to use the same test bench and test suite that I used with the RX 580. So that means I was using Call of Duty Cold War, Doom Eternal, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Watchdogs Legion, and of course, Cyberpunk 2077. So the most demanding games of 2020. And while Doom Eternal isn't the most demanding game of all time, it's the best game of 2020 in my opinion. And it's a good idea to know if your 1050 Ti can actually run that. And because it is a little bit easier, it's kind of interested to see what kind of settings we can get. All right, so the test bench remains the same. CPU, Ryzen 7, 3700X, stock clocks, 16 gigabytes of DDR4 3200. You can see all the specs down here below. They're also in the description if you guys want more details or if you want to pick any of it up. So nothing super crazy there. Stock standard test bench stuff. So enough dilly-dallying around. Let's take a look at some benchmarks. So the answer to the question, are modern AAA titles playable on the GTX 1050 Ti? Well, it's technically a yes and a no, depending on how you look at the situation. Was I able to get every game outside of Cyberpunk 2077 running at 60 FPS average, or about 60 FPS? Yes, I was. I was able to do that, but we had to go down to 720p low on most titles. The only game that could run 1080p, 60 plus, or playable anyway, was Doom Eternal, and that's the easiest game to run like ever. Every other game had to go down to 720p. Call of Duty might have been able to handle 900p. There's enough room there if you're looking for 60 FPS that I'm pretty sure that would have worked okay. But every other game, so Watchdogs Legion, Valhalla, and Cyberpunk couldn't even really cut it at 720p. Could not hit 60 FPS. So you'd be looking at like 720p 30. I mean, it was hitting about 45 on Cyberpunk. So that game, not so much on this card. Valhalla ran fine, and same thing with Watchdogs at 720p low settings. Now, if you're okay with a 30 FPS cap, 1080p was doable on most of these games, besides Cyberpunk, of course. So, like I said, it really depends. Now, if you have a 1050 Ti, that's your graphics card, you don't really have the option to upgrade right now. So what do? Well, personally, if you were to ask me, I would just recommend playing some older titles right now, or some indie titles. I wouldn't be looking at playing modern AAA games. Now, you absolutely can with these cards, as long as you're okay with heavily compromised settings. Like, you can play Watchdogs Legion at 720p. It's perfectly playable. It's not the best visual experience, but it will work. Same thing with like Assassin's Creed and all these games. Doom actually looked really good at 1080p, even at the lowest settings. To me, like, it still looked just fine. So you're still good on Doom. Cyberpunk, 720p 30 though. I mean, technically you're still doing better than the baseline consoles, because those are hitting like 15 FPS at the low points. I mean, that got pretty bad if you saw the Digital Foundry footage. So it's doing much better than those. But outside of that, it's not a very good experience. Personally, to me, Cyberpunk really needs to run at about 90 FPS for the controls to feel responsive enough to me. But once again, maybe it's playable, just playable enough for you. So the answer to the question, like I said, is both a yes and a no. Technically, yes, it can play all the games. Here today, it still works. But like I mentioned earlier, this was a GPU that was below what I would consider minimum standard even 5 years ago. So it's not surprising that it's not really cutting the mustard. And once again, taking a look at the Steam hardware survey, in the past month or so, we see a sharp drop-off in people using 1050 Ti's. And that's likely due to the fact that it can't really cut it on modern AAA games. Now, like I just mentioned before, if you're going to play older titles, it's perfectly fine. So if you're playing pretty much anything from 2018 on back, you should be just fine with that. Once again, you'll have to compromise settings, but it should be able to handle like 1080p at low at the very worst. Now, with the 4 gigabytes of VRAM, most of the games ran medium textures, some ran high. So, that's not really a big deal. And visually, it still looked fine to me. Obviously, you're not going to have all the other settings and whatnot, but the game, to me, for the most part, they were pretty playable. But I'm really interested to hear your guys' thoughts on this. Due to the situation, would you recommend that folks maybe just push through, play the games that they want to play, and just compromise settings? Or do you think that it'd be wise to maybe just go through that backlog, maybe play some indie games or older titles, or, revisit an old series that you really loved? Mass Effect Remaster seems to be coming out here soon. I think that'll cut the mustard for a lot of people and should be able to run just fine on something like a 1050 Ti. But we will talk more about that here in the future. But personally, I think that that's the better option. If you are a 1050 Ti owner, let me know what you're doing. Are you thinking about maybe just toughing it out? Or are you looking at possibly going console? I'm interested to hear your thoughts down in the description below. Also, make sure you smash that like button. Like I mentioned before, these are the games that we have to play on YouTube to gain any traction. Smaller channels like mine are just getting decimated with all sorts of tricks and stuff that YouTube's trying to play. So once again, I want to thank you all for your support and your interactions with the channel and the community. And that's really all I have for you guys here today. And I will catch you guys in the next video.